Good evening, everyone. My tongue is tied here. Today is March 14th, 2011. We are having a committee of the whole meeting discussing our budget. If you could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And at this time, to make this meeting official, I'd ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Peasant.
Here.
Shea.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Rose.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York. Absent. Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
13 present, 1 absent.
13 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum. And before I go on to the next portion of our agenda, which will be discussing our budget, if there is anyone from the public that would like to say something for open comment, we've got a lot going on, a lot to do, but I would open up the mic in case anybody would like to say a short comment. At this time, would anybody like to offer a public comment? Please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Okay. Hearing none, we'll go on to item number 2, which is the review of the budget for 2011 and 2012. And before I hand it over to City Manager Borchert, I would just like to say this council's been through a lot. This town's been through a lot. We had came in under some pretty troubled times, troubled waters. We had a task force that came together and looked over many of our situations. Much of it was sales tax and money related. We've weathered 2 budgets. This is weathered 1 budget. First budget was handed to us. Second budget we were able to balance within the first year, given almost a $7 million shortfall. And I applaud staff, I applaud the council for coming together to make that happen, and also the recommendations from the task force with Kevin Diamond and now Alderman Levin. Remember, this budget is a map. It's a plan. We're going to talk tonight about where we came from in the last year, many of the things that we were able to do last year. We paved a lot of roads, offered a lot of services that most towns were not able to offer. We kept our senior programs in place. We had to make some cuts. We're down quite a few in head count, roughly around 10%, from the 300 that we normally have to around 260, 270. Got 4 counters down to 2 down at the first floor at City Hall, so we're doing more with less. But we're trying to deliver as much as we can and keep those citizens happy. So with that said, just keep in mind what we're going through tonight is a map, it's a guide, it's a fence, so to speak, and we will rely on staff to keep spending below that fence, not over the fence. Now, there are some things that are going to come up. Like last year, we had storms that hit us, and we went beyond the fence in certain areas. This year, we had, a blizzard, a record blizzard, the 3rd record blizzard in the history of the Midwest that hit us, and we had to go beyond the fence. But in the end, the overall fence was spent below, and we have a surplus, which is going to go into our fund balance not only this year, but also predicted for next year based on revenues coming in. And revenues have the bottom that we were, I know when we first got in office, many of us that were new, every month we get the sales tax report, and it was down. And it's like, we expect to have certain dollars that are consistent, like property taxes, which are consistent, but sales tax, which is a big portion of the revenue that we've been used to, was doing this. Well, now we're starting to see that sales tax level off and actually tick back up, and that's a good sign. And that's what we were hoping to be prepared for with this economy, is a turnaround, and as position ourselves the best we can, so as this economy does turn around, we can flourish. So with that said, again, this is a map, it's a guide, it's not written in stone. Even after we pass this in April, it could be adjusted, as it has been in the past. So let's keep that in mind. Let's deliver to those citizens that we were elected by, and at the same time still keep our money balanced, and also at the end be able to hopefully put a few bucks in the bank here. So with that said, City Manager Borchert, you can give us a recap and then an intro into this budget. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think it was a great introduction relative to the budget. and the budget being a fence, but the budget is a fence of spending. With your permission, the city has occasionally spent more than the fence on a particular area, as Mayor DeCiani mentioned, flood issues and the garbage collection. Certainly the city realized the budget was going to be necessarily overspent if everything was done that was asked to be done. With your permission, that work was done, and we went over the fence and shagged the ball and got back as fast as we could inside that fence and operated within the fence. And I think the city staff's past practice illustrates that, and certainly would offer to you, although I am the lame duck, this team assembled is as committed as ever for you and for the community to continue to deliver the budget during the year by spending less than what the fence provides, but providing communication and dialogue through the committee process, the council process, so there's constant reevaluation as the budget is spent through the 12 months of the year. The budget process, again, would remind you, you would understand, starts 9 months or so ago with a re-evaluation of what are the priorities, what are the goals, what are the services that need to be provided for. And every other year there's a citizen survey done. This year there were significant extra questions put in that citizen survey downstream of the economy to just touch base with the community again as to what services are fundamentally core as it relates to what Elmhurst is and what Elmhurst is all about, and understanding what those services are. You all provided direction to maintain those services in the budget, but try to live within reasonable financial revenues and keep it balanced Elmhurst style. But Elmhurst is about quality of service and quality of infrastructure and quality of maintaining that infrastructure. So you painted the target for us to hit from the city operations side. I would present to you and suggest that this target has been hit, and it's a much better news budget than the previous 2 years' budgets that were in a very difficult economic time. And maybe to keep more strategically focused, or try to be strategically focused, while we also provide line by line, if necessary, detailed responses and answers to your questions, would like to spend a little time on the strategic goals and the overarching accomplishments and expectations, which is also in the budget document, while we then go through the agenda that's been laid out. Finance Director Gaston has provided the areas of the budget that have the expenditure areas identified. We'll go through those. But first, from again that strategic overview, Roman numerals way at the beginning, 1, 2, and 3. We probably, myself included, miss year after year after year, don't even look at it. But it's good to remember that we're about the legislative mayor and 14 members of the city council that set the policies, and below that is your administrative team. And Roman numeral 2, the broad organization chart of the city, with again the structure that you have established as to how you wish to conduct your business, how you wish to conduct your affairs, not necessarily just because it's been done this way last year, but because you would like it to be done this way going forward. I call it the Elmhurst advantage, the Elmhurst edge, the 4 committees that meet every other Monday and bring reports to the city council. City council, the every other Mondays, then take policy decisions, hand off those policies to the city staff through this organization chart with a significant list of advisory citizens serving the community in these commission positions, providing advice and recommendations to both the staff and to you at the board on how to conduct business and how to provide services to the community. And we're guided by the back of the budget book, Character Counts, and by the mission statement. We do have ideals and standards and You have steered that, created that, identified that as a standard for yourselves and for the city staff to follow. And we endeavor to meet that, not just at the end of the year, but every day. Maybe then getting into just the general fund summary. The summary of the transmittal letter on page 6. I think this is a good news budget with the yellow caution light on. You know, the red light, from my perspective, is off. We're not full speed ahead green, but cautiously going forward. The budget does, on page 6, this little summary, reestablishes many of the previously reduced levels of service back to a more sustainable level, provides for reasonable, still a bit throttled support for infrastructure maintenance, does provide for full financing of the storm and sanitary comprehensive planning study, provides, Finance Committee just earlier this evening, I think, authorized and signed the committee report coming out of the Finance Committee recommending that we reestablish the working cash fund over a 5-year, this year plus 4 years, a 5-year total payment program. The budget provides for that, anticipating that such a recommendation would come forward, and also provides significant increases in the general fund balance. But we see in that second year out that if we spent to the fence in that second year out on all of the lines, it'd be a little bit of a drawdown in the fund balance. We really don't anticipate we'll spend the defense on every line of that second year out, but it shows that we need to be proceeding, you know, proceeding with caution. Guess we go through quickly the general fund summary material. Would ask you to take a quick look at page 22, 23. I think it was Alderman Levin asked 2 weeks ago, what about some of the changes, staff, from previous years to this year? There's some big number changes, and my response was, in a general fashion, it's the way capital hits the budget. Capital has a way to swing what looks like the budget in a significant way to the left or to the right because of the large numbers that are associated with some of the infrastructure projects. And some of the infrastructure projects are funded with grants. That's revenue that's not repeating revenue. So capital has a way to change the bottom line of a budget in a significant way. But in Elmhurst, the council's leadership over all of the recent years has been steady, 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 steady relative to operations, and manage your operations, do what's necessary, but don't do too much. Don't celebrate in good times and try to get through the lean times in a steady fashion. And if you look at the staffing, full-time personnel, page 22, we're proposing, because of the lean years, getting between the rock and a hard place over the last couple of years, we've reduced where it was needed to be reduced, maintaining core values. Some of that we reported couldn't be sustained. We're suggesting, particularly IT, planning, zoning, engineering support, reestablish proper levels, and then going forward at this level of, on the city side, the blue on page 22, 267 employees. Looking backwards, the last time the city of Elmhurst operated with 267 employees was back in 1996, 16 years ago. So we've cut back with your support and direction. I think done it in a pretty reasonable fashion, maintaining the core values, the core services, and we're projecting pretty much keeping the line at that. You know, absent a significant area of service that the community doesn't want, we think it's going to be hard to keep it at 267, but that's where we're identifying it going forward. So that work's been done. Now we're seeing the revenue starting to come back. that allows for financing to come back and the working cash fund to be paid back and the general fund balance beginning to slowly return. And then if we could page forward to 86 and 88, actually getting into the general fund. Just take a quick look at that. I think very important projected general fund balance graph showing the fund balance actual versus your fund balance range goals. And the good news is this general fund balance that was anticipated in this fiscal year to be providing a contribution to the fund of $233,000. Your adjustments on revenues coupled with city staff's not spending to the fence is resulting in what we anticipate now to be a contribution not of $233,000 but $1.5 million to the fund balance. About $1 million of that was because of revenue coming in over what was anticipated, and about $500,000 with collective general fund spending less than the fence. As Mayor DeCiani mentioned, we spent more for flood control, we spent more on snow removal, we spent more on ice control, more on hauling snow, more on garbage collection, more than what was budgeted, but with the staff not top down, but really bottom up with the Big Ideas Committee in place, which was labor operated, labor initiated with supervisors' oversight. Everybody is looking at how to not spend money if it doesn't provide a major return for the community. So we need that to be the corporate culture, because that happens when nobody's looking. People are doing what they're doing. We want them to be doing what we've suggested is the right thing to do, what our character count says is the right thing to do, which is do the best job you possibly can with the least expensive charge. I think this is the proof in the pudding, as our collective advisors as we were growing up said, you know, look for proof in the pudding. Here's the proof in the pudding. Money going back, staying in the general fund, allowing for services to go forward in the next year. Quick look at the revenues on the pie chart on page 88. We do anticipate in the budget, if the budget anticipates estimates, if you will, both sides of the equation. It's an estimate of revenue and an estimate of spending to meet the targeted objective that the community has painted for you, which you have painted for the city staff. Some of the revenues are not as under control as others. Some, frankly, to your collective credit at the City Council, you've adjusted and put into play, and they're performing as intended and providing the revenues that help pay for the services. This budget provides, if we start with the property taxes, it does anticipate taxes being received based on the tax levy that you approved in December. We anticipate that this December coming in 2011, you will do a property tax adjustment as you have in the past, but it would be limited in this budget proposed to be less than 5%. We're not anticipating that you'd make adjustments as we go around that pie chart to the right. Other taxes includes the hotel tax, real estate transfer tax, food and beverage tax, and the foreign fire insurance tax. We don't anticipate that you'll be making adjustments in those. We are anticipating there'll be some rebounding in receipts in that area as the economy continues to improve, but no action on the council's part. The same with utility taxes. Those utility taxes are in place. We have talked in the past about some loopholes to perhaps consider closing, but we're not anticipating that any of those would need to be addressed with the utility taxes that are anticipated. Same with sales taxes. Sales taxes are estimated to be rebounding by 2% over what is anticipated will be their fiscal year-end total. Sales taxes this year were a big reason why the fund balance is able to be positive from what was anticipated. And again, the council's credit, you approved an additional home rule sales tax. They are performing as designed and as intended. Interdepartmental and inter-fund transfers really are more administrative tools to move the dollars where the council wants them. Interest income goes up a little bit because there's a little more dollars in the bank. The interest earnings are still, as you know, very, very poor. There was a time when interest income was a much bigger piece of the city's general fund revenue pie. Service charges is fees for garbage collection and fire alarm services. These do anticipate being adjusted to, on the garbage side, to balance the increases that the city contract has for buying the garbage service. We simply are passing on that expense to the city's customers. Licenses, permits, and fines, a lot of these are anticipated to be going up. The council has in the past put in your municipal code automatic CPI indicators that provide adjustments that don't require new council action. So that's been identified and taken into account. And intergovernmental is the city of Elmhurst share of state income tax and grants that takes care of itself based on what the state does and how the population counts come in. So that's really the overview of the revenue side. At this point, would entertain any general questions. It would be our intent to then get into the expense side, beginning on pages 109, 110. And as we get into the operations, as an example of the finance, the next area is finance, we'll take a quick look at the, what I'll call the setup pages that are in the general fund that explain a little of the oversight of the department, the organization, the details of the organization, past goals, and objectives for the coming year that you can see. You don't need to look at them in detail today, but maybe go back and look at them as a resource document going forward. It allows a better understanding of what is in the budget from an expense side. And again, the expenses are estimated. Many of the expense items will need to be reviewed at committee and council if they're items that are needing to be bid. We chatted about earlier, the labor is the labor that's anticipated and estimated to provide for that staffing that's has been identified. Your labor adjustments are through union negotiations, and those we report on as they are completed with negotiations with discussion and executive session. So that kind of sets the stage of where we're at and how we're going to go forward. I think the budget is, again, a good news budget, but all ahead, slow, caution, yellow lights on, but it's a much better budget than what we've been able to provide relative to services over the last couple of years. If there's questions, maybe generally we'll take those now and then go to page 109, 110.
Questions, Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, general questions on page 104, and I guess this is just a note as we go through the budget. On page 104, it shows our expenditures by type, and the line items to note, I guess, from my perspective, is salary and wages going from 17,490,000 up to 18,521,000 approximately, which is about a $1 million increase there. And then contractual services, that's almost $1 million, roughly $900,000 increase from the estimated for 10-11. And then obviously the capital outlay, and we've talked about that in the previous meeting as well as tonight already. But that's an increase from last year, or proposed increase of $2.5 million. So as we go through the budget, if we can highlight those, how each department impacts those numbers, it would be appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Marilyn Gaston for helping me. I've had a lot of questions over the past several weeks, and thank you for your response. It's helped me grasp this a little more since it's just my second time around. But just a point for, I guess, personal clarification to make sure I'm looking at this the right way. The budget we have now on page 14, under 1011 budget, it shows $126,543,908. And then when I look back at last year's budget, because that number didn't ring a bell with me, it was the proposed budget last year of $118,782,608. So I was confused, but it's my understanding that the 1011 proposed budget for $118 million that we approved and this number are different because of carryovers, correct?
Ms. Gaston?
Yes, that's correct, and actually the council approved, what the council approves is the budget, the proposed budget, any changes that either the council or staff makes to that budget, and the carryovers. So the approved budget includes any carryovers from the previous year.
Okay, so that would lead to my next question, just for clarity. The 11-12 proposed of $135,583,746, are there carryovers in that number?
Not yet. However, there will be. This is the budget that we would anticipate spending next year. Right now, every department head is looking at his or her own budget and projects that are going on right now to determine will they be done in this fiscal year or will they have to be carried over to next fiscal year. They will be submitting their list of carryovers to Tom and myself, and we will provide you then with that list of carryovers. Okay. So this budget, the $135 million does not, but at the end of the day, the budget that you approve will have carryovers, but you will know exactly what those are.
Okay, so I guess just for my own reference, to make it more apples to apples, the proposed budget 11-12 of $135 million and change versus last year's proposed budget of $118 million and change is about a $17 million difference if you do the apple-to-apple proposed versus proposed. Because...
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very good. Any other questions?
Without the question, I would say if there was a question, why is there a difference? The difference would be capital. The biggest component would be capital.
Right.
As you can see, the staffing is going up a little bit as some of the positions that went dark and were kept dark are anticipated to be at least budgeted and then probably filled at some point in next fiscal year, but maybe not exactly on May 1st. So that differential is going to be increases in expenses that the city has to pay for, projects that are one-time projects, which are capital. That'll make up for the differences.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions? If not, we'll go on. City Manager Borchert.
And basically now we're going to go through the budget based on the loan numbers of the budget going forward, with the only exception being if a department couldn't be here, we'll skip them and then schedule them later. So beginning at the front then would be administration, elected officials, pages 105 through 108. In the staffing is really a proposal that going forward there would be a standalone assistant city manager along with the city manager portions of that salary would be reflected, change would be in the salaries and wages of the administration. No other significant changes in these pages from what you're used to seeing.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first line of administration, the 10-11 budget for full-time salaries was $286,900. Estimated was at $294,000. Budgeted amount of $397,200. I'm guessing that's the 2 employees that you indicated previously, or that you're adding 2 bodies, and this is where they show up?
I think really there'll be just an additional 1 body, but this body will be leaving, and over the years accumulated leave that is a payout upon taking retirement, so there'll be that one-time payout.
So it's not a headcount addition, it's more accounting for various things that are going to happen with the changeover at your position?
It would be both. Yeah, there'll be an assistant city manager that Chief Cop is assistant city manager / chief cop. Most of his salary is coming out of the fire department. It would be proposed beginning May 1st, probably won't happen May 1st, but upon the reorganization, a new city manager, a new assistant city manager would be provided for. You would need to hire the city manager, hire an assistant city manager, and then if Chief Cop is retained as assistant city manager, there would then need to be a fire chief. So there would be a significant change in staffing. Significant change in staffing is in this area of the budget.
Thank you.
Alderman Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 questions under administration. My first one is for budget. Last year's budget, it was $5,000 for sick pay, and for projection now it's $61,100. Are we expecting a flu epidemic, or?
I've been blessed that I don't get sick, but you do have a policy that somebody who retires that accumulates sick leave, doesn't use the sick leave, you get paid out on some of that sick leave that's accumulated when you retire. So a lot of that is, again, the payout upon my retirement.
Okay. Is that for, did you say we do that for all employees?
Yes.
Okay. All right. My second question is under data processing. I'm going to group it all together. Data processing is under administration. It's under zoning, fire, and public works. What expenditures are funneled through data processing?
Data processing is the IT department, so the IT budget is allocated out to all departments. So you will see data processing in most of department budgets. So it is totally allocated out.
All right. Could you explain that a little bit further? Because it's gone up, it's going up, all of them grouped together for
Yes.
data processing is going up $221,000.
Yes. And that's because it's not going up from budget, but it is going up from what we estimate actual to be. Because last year's budget anticipated at least 2 to 3 full-time people that were not hired. The budget coming up in the 2012 year anticipates those vacant positions now being filled. So the year we're in, we were down in expense because we didn't have the bodies, and we didn't do some of the work. Now, in the new year, we're hopefully going to be able to hire that staff. Therefore, the expense has gone up, and the allocation out to the departments is greater.
Could Mr. Trozine just elaborate on that just a little bit? Because he started to tell me exactly what was in here, and then we had to get started.
Basically,
Or maybe
Part of
not.
the IT budget.
there we go. Hopefully this is working now. As Marilyn Gaston had pointed out, it is a full allocation of the entire IT budget. It includes salaries, commodities, all of our purchasing of all the supplies, our software maintenance contracts. Just our enterprise software, our maintenance on that is $100,000 a year. So all of this allocation is basically those expenditures: capital, commodities, contractual services, salaries, and benefits are totally spread between all the different divisions
Okay,
of
thank
the
you.
budget.
Thank you.
Alderman Brown.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to piggyback on that question. How is it determined what allocation per each department goes to data processing? Is it a percentage per department? How does that change year to year?
It's basically been a flat percentage that was calculated a long time ago. We actually are continuing to review that to make sure that those allocations make sense and stuff. We're basically looking at different models to how to allocate that, and we're actually doing that with equipment maintenance also. Those allocations have been in place for a number of years, and we're taking a look, and we'll present that to one of the committees as far as once we come up. Obviously, it wasn't done this year. Is it the number of hours that are worked on equipment? Is it the number of vehicles per division and stuff? So both of those internal service areas, we're looking at the allocations. But it is a percentage that's been consistent throughout the, so
For instance,
this is probably 5%
5%.
of the budget.
Thank you.
We talked about rubbish earlier in the public works. It's about 5% of the budget. So that's where I was estimating of where the salaries.
I just to state maybe very, very obvious, but we only spend the dollars once. We spend it as a city actually in the IT budget. It's an expenditure there. But interdepartmentally, it is shown where the consumer is using those services to provide a better reflection of total costs of that service being provided by that department for the council and for the staff, so it's there for evaluation. Is this good? Is this return of the services being provided worth this expense? We want to show to the community, to the council, and to our own staff what are those actual costs associated with that service. But again, you only pay it once, but it does show up in two places: within the budget where it's being spent, and then as an interdepartmental charge.
Very good. Alderman Pezza?
Thank you. Going back to Alderman Healy's question, I just want to make sure I understood correctly. The explanation of the jump up in the full-time by 103,000, did you say there we were going to hire a full-time assistant city manager?
That's what the budget would provide, yes.
That's the first I've ever heard of that. I've never heard that.
The first time it's been in the budget.
Never heard that discussion or anything
Well,
about
I think it was
that
in the
until-
mayor's, it was alluded to, I think, in the mayor's council budget on staffing and operations, at least indirectly, if not directly.
So the first time in Elmhurst history, we'd have a full-time city manager and a full-time assistant city manager.
Not, it's been the first time in an extended period of time. When I was appointed city manager, I was appointed from a full-time assistant city manager position. At that point, there was, again, full-time manager, I was the assistant manager, and there were department heads. As I moved into the city manager position, kind of institutional recollection, there then was a reliance on department heads going forward, which continued until about 1.5 years ago when Chief Kopp was appointed with your approval to be also an assistant manager, assisting the manager from a succession planning perspective while also doing the fire chief duties and responsibilities. We thought we'd talk about this a little bit, maybe more appropriate at the fire department side than at this point in side, but it's my recommendation to you as I'm leaving that the job length, breadth, depth, duties, responsibilities, expectations, time demands for the manager and for the fire chief are such that the fire chief can't be helping the manager if he's the fire chief if the manager needs help as an assistant, it'd be our recommendation, my recommendation, that the difficulties and the time demands of those positions require a full-time attention. And as the department heads are having more stretch and demand, they need the help of an assistant manager if they can't get to the city manager. So this would be what the budget would provide and allow for the community and for your organization chart would be, again, a city manager, standalone assistant, and then department heads managing the operations of the lead departments, which is very, very, very typical for communities much smaller than Elmhurst, and really the norm for a community the size of Elmhurst.
Alderman Levin.
Well, I am aware that most communities have assistant city managers and maybe even an assistant to the city manager. And I understand that there's a benefit in terms of a transition, particularly from a longtime city manager to someone who might be new. But as the position has been constructed for the budget purposes, is there a certain set of duties that's contemplated specifically for the assistant city manager, or is it just generally to assist the manager?
I think at this point it's general, not thought through in great detail because it's a budget proposal. It would be a budget fence. Wanted to, frankly, we're pleased that the staffing as proposed could be accommodated with reestablishing services, reestablishing a more appropriate support to infrastructure and to capital. And in that regard, have it more than balanced by making contributions to the working cash fund and to the fund balance of the general fund. It's a staffing model that strongly recommend is the staffing model that will provide for the highest probable success operationally going forward than attempting to get by with less. You get by with less, but you take some things don't get the attention that they would otherwise get. So
one follow-up,
sure.
Mr. Mayor. The other question is, I know that this increase would be partly because of your payout for retirement, but is there a range that we're contemplating in this budget for the city manager position?
Yes.
Can you tell me what that would be?
Less than the manager.
Not more, all right.
Probably a 125 to 150 range. Again, it would be we've talked in a general way a bit earlier as to the personnel plan that is completed with an analysis done of all positions, and certainly this position, if approved and budgeted, should be calculated by that HR consultant that studies the length and the breadth and the depth, the details, the educational responsibilities, the difficulties of the job, and with a system identifies then a proper minimum and a proper maximum pay scale range. It would be, however, we would estimate it would be in that range.
And that's the salary part, not the benefit
Correct.
portion. All right,
Correct.
thank you.
Alderman Rose.
Really, in fairness, I think this notion of the assistant city manager, and Alderman Pezza may not be aware of this, was discussed about 2 years ago, 4 years ago, and then 6 years ago. I think that there have been various times that has come up for significant discussion, probably in executive committee. A number of conceptual models were actually presented at that time around duties, et cetera. I think in all those instances, I think the budget simply didn't allow for it, or where there were other reasons, we said we're not going to do that. But I think it has been discussed probably for the last 6 years, and so it would have been, you would not have been aware of that, but there had been a lot of discussion around that as a possibility, so, and reasons to not do that. So I think we also have to keep in mind right now, this budget has it in place for approximately 6 months. Is that true? for the transition.
Yes.
Alderman Gudenkauf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think when I look at the total staffing numbers, we're talking about increasing staffing over budgeted from the previous fiscal year by just one position, right? And this, so what we're looking at doing is bringing back a handful of dark positions and then adding one position. Could you just refresh my memory as to how many positions we had dark this year that we're now hoping to fill? I know there were a handful of them.
Again, if you look at page 22, it gives the budgeted history.
Right, I see that. That just shows the total number that we,
So we were down seven from budgeted to the 266, down 7, and it was a dynamic situation over the last 2 years, but the city went with I would think, maybe an additional 8 positions dark for periods of time. And then filled them when needed, but didn't fill until judged to be necessary, and then actually reduced the staffing level full-time to full-time as shown. So again, I appreciate the question that there's some dynamic, the players are moving around. It would be, again, this budget officer's recommendation that the complexity of the jobs are such that a standalone assistant manager is needed again. And in a net way, it's with other positions going away, but that position being brought in to play a major role, that major role being a significant aid in economic development matters, which I think are very important for this community going forward.
so we've just cut out of the budget 7 positions, but then we had an additional 8 or so that were dark that are going to get filled, but those 7 positions that we cut, we're not adding back in to the budget, and some of that you're hoping will be made up by the addition of an assistant city manager to cover the responsibilities for some of those positions we've eliminated. Is that a fair summary? Okay, thank you.
Alderman Healy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just from a tactical perspective, I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to make sure. So it sounds like we've got this assistant manager budget for about 6 months. If we approve this budget with it in, it's not a full year, something short of a full year.
I think Alderman Rose is correct. It might only be filled for about 6 months of the coming year. I think we probably budgeted for full year. So the fence would be the full year. We would, again, anticipate we wouldn't be spending the whole full year because it wouldn't be filled for half of the year.
But in terms of actually going out and hire this person, if we pass this budget with that position in there, I'm going to guess that you're not going to start, the staff's not going to start the process of hiring this assistant manager, that will come with future council action down the road.
That would follow your appointment of a replacement manager and probably some orientation with that individual and the city council, and that individual getting their arms around this budget plan, so it become their budget plan, and then this budget would provide this opportunity to spend, but there would need to be a check of the signals and a timeout and is this still the play that you want to run? Is this still the operational plan you want to implement? This would provide for that. But certainly by your approval of the budget, it doesn't automatically happen.
And that's what I want to make sure. I want to make sure that I could say, yeah, I'm in favor of the budget. That doesn't automatically mean we're adding an assistant city manager. We'd go through some process down the road, much like we're doing with city manager.
Right.
Thank you.
It's a good point, because in all these fences, mini fences that we have, we got 2 bites of the apple. One when we approve the budget, and then the bigger bite is afterwards when we actually allocate it. So, and that'll go through. Most of those will go through council, committee, and final votes as well too. So, so we've got that safeguard there as well. Just so we're all understanding of that. So, Alderman Levin.
I just want to clarify what I thought Alderman Healy was clarifying. If position is 125 to 150, the difference in the budget between the 10-11 and the 11-12 is only about $110,000, and if some of that's your buyout, then it doesn't add up.
Two things. First, the sick pay payout is on a separate line. If you look 4 lines down, the 10-06
Right.
line,
I see
so
that.
that's a separate line. Also, the city manager and the budget, the contemplated budget for an assistant city manager, they're allocated not just to this particular department, but they're allocated 4 or 5 different places. So 0.6 of the proposed assistant city manager position is allocated to administration. The other 0.4 is most likely in the motor fuel tax fund, I beg your pardon, the utility fund. So most managers who cross lines, like a city manager, like an assistant city manager, you'll find the finance director, those salaries will be allocated to many different departments.
Okay. Alderman Pezza?
Well, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand. Had Alderman Healy not asked this question and this wasn't talked about and this got passed, a couple of months from now, those of us who didn't know anything about this would have been told that we approved the hiring of an assistant city manager. Is that correct?
Well, if it didn't get any discussion, when it were to be implemented, I would think there would be a discussion that would start with the budget provides for the opportunity to staff the position, and the budget shows that, and here would be a suggested plan, but that plan would probably go through the finance committee relative to the size of the job. I might be low with the 125 to 150. I think the manager job is advertised at 170, 175, so it probably would be more, it would be a proper separation between the manager and the assistant, and then the assistant and the department heads. That really needs to be evaluated and studied so that it makes sense. There's that internal equity that's talked about and external competitiveness. But you know, I would really want to state again that the staff never has any intentions of surprising the elected officials, the city council. You're the board that sets the policy. You identify the goals. Staff, or you're confidant in implementing your policy through the operations plan. So, you know, please, we attempt to be efficient with your time and to be expeditious in getting to the implementation of the plans, but want to be as thorough as possible in explaining what we believe the plan must be to achieve your goals and objectives, and certainly not here to surprise you.
In fairness, too, I think, you know, until we determine who that person is that's going to replace City Manager Borchert, it could be a rock star that can perform on his own. It could be somebody that has weaknesses or maybe, you know, needs an assistant. So I think that this is a safeguard that it puts us in a position to handle transition, to handle, you know, one component, whether it's economic development, whether it's HR, whatever that component might be. And Alderman Rose had a hand. Do you have anything more to add, Alderman Rose? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say it's my understanding we are not approving an
Right.
assistant city manager at all tonight, or next week or the week after or the week after. All we're doing is approving funds if we so choose to do that at some point, that we at least have the funds there to do it. That's my understanding of that. That's what this budget is about. It is not approving the concept. It's simply saying, let's put the money in there. We don't want to get 2 or 3 months down the line and think, great, we want to get an assistant city manager, and we have no funds there to do that. We haven't allocated that. So that's my understanding. That's really all we're doing. We're not subverting that committee system. So it seems, it's just allowing us, it's kind of make no decision before it's time. Make sure that we have the money there in case we want to do that.
Alderman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with what Alderman Rose said. Our decision is really whether or not we're approving to put it in the budget, not necessarily approving position. But that brings me to a conversation that we seem to have every year at this time, and I want to throw it out there to city staff and the rest of the city council. Seeing as how we've spent almost 1 hour on the first line item in the budget. In the past, when we've seen something that was obvious to take out of the budget or add to the budget, whether it was missed or it was something that we were all for, we made the decision right then. But what I found most beneficial is to ask city staff to take notes. So when we get to the end of the budgeting process, we have a list of the top 10 line items or 12 line items or whatever they are that we reconsider. So I'm going to make a request that city staff does that. We've done it both ways in the past. I found it most effective when city staff says, okay, assistant city manager, we're going to circle back on that. Obviously, we're not going to make that decision tonight. So, and it also helps, certainly helps me from my perspective, because there are cuts and there's additions to both. So I'd like to know at the end of this process if I've got $1.2 million in proposed cuts and maybe $800,000 in proposed increases. It allows me to put those conversations in context. So first point is we're simply approving a budget for that expense. But even before we do that, when we get to the end of the budgeting process, I'm requesting that city staff does take note when we do run into a line item like this, and does so. And then I think at the end, even Mr. Borchert or Ms. Gaston actually gave us an outline of the top things that we pulled. So, I mean, we can certainly spend more time on this city manager line item, but I already have a check mark by it. Right. I would ask.
We can certainly do that from a staff perspective. That has been a tactic that has served, I think, both the council well from an efficiency perspective and allows the staff a little chance to dig out some of the details that may not be as completely in front of us as we'd like to completely answer your question. So we could do that.
Very good. And as far as I agree with Alderman Morley, and given the list of things that we need to go over tonight, I think, in order to achieve those at a relatively reasonable hour, I think we should probably, I know Alderman Brown, I was at his town hall meeting, and he's passionate about the sidewalks and making sure there's funding in the budget for sidewalks. So, we can, if the aldermen that have those concerns can talk directly to staff at the end, hopefully we can have something that we can all work with. But I think if we want to vote on stuff individually and do this all in, line by line, it's going to take quite a while. So, in fairness to the council, in fairness to staff, and hopefully we can get through this quickly, and then at the end have our amendments and hash things out. So
we'll circle that area, get more details ready to go, and we'll, when we finish, come back to the items that you asked that we take a second look at.
Very good. Okay, Alderman Brown.
Yeah, I mean, I also agree with Alderman Morley's comments and Alderman Rose's previous comments as well about, we're not saying that we're moving forward with an assistant city manager. It has been approximately 4 years or so that we as a council have talked some pro, some con of having an assistant city manager. This gives us the option this year to do it. I guess the one thing that was a surprise to me was to see such an increase in this budget line item and not having that follow-up sheet on the following page, breaking that down and highlighting that, because I would think that it would be, there wouldn't be any questions if that was highlighted there compared to seeing that big differential from one year to the next.
Again, staff can address those specifically for you, and we'll, and once those are addressed, if you could share that info with everyone, that would be great. So, City Manager Borchert.
If we're making those notes then and moving forward, we would go to the finance section, pages 1 of Board of Police Fire Commission, 109, 1010. Again, it's advisory commission with the support of the HR staff to manage some of the support activities that are necessary for the Board of Police and Fire Commission to exercise, as well as contractual services to complete the exams for that process. No changes noted. Professional contractual services are going up because of the need for a full redo of the fire department eligibility firefighter process. Not process, but eligibility list. Then on to Finance 111 and 113, and consistent with what I suggested we would take a quick look at would be pages 24, 25, and 26, which really provide the foundation for the expenditure pages 111 and 113. We've got the mission of the Finance Department, more detail on the organizational chart to show how that Finance Department is organized, last year's accomplishments, and the self-imposed expectations in some regard, and the community and city council imposed expectations from another perspective relative to all of the expectations. To get this done, it's anticipated and estimated that on the next page, 26, the expenditures would look like this, just broken down by the Finance Department area, with a bit of an explanation of the expenditures. So you've got that as a background to look at in detail as you wish. But again, from a traditional perspective, page 111, 113 are the traditional areas of the budget that we look at, and not a lot of changes there.
Okay. Next.
Finance moves then into HR. HR has been pulled out. It was actually several years ago a component of finance, but it's been identified as better to track separately, and it's been pulled out as its own area, pages 114 to 116. And again, if you look at page 27 and 28, you get the accomplishments last year of the HR group, some of the self-imposed expectations for the coming year, that summary that we talked about before, and again, page 114 through 116 are the breakouts of the HR department. And again, no real highlights. We try not to talk about lowlights, but IT, pages 117 and 118 are the areas of the budget. Support materials are on page 29, 30, and 31. And here we earlier talked about last year's, or the current year's budget. There are some IT positions provided for but are still dark, and they're still dark, but it's proposed that they get filled now that the comprehensive IT plan has been received from Northern Illinois University, beginning with Mr. Stenson's leadership and Mr. Kopp's leadership, beginning to target the higher priorities of that IT plan. That IT plan to be implemented is going to need those vacant staff positions filled. So that's probably the biggest news in this area of the budget. Those vacant positions get filled, and the comprehensive plan just received a bit ago will be implemented over time.
Very good. Alderman Brem and Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is one of the areas that we also touched on when we were talking about the refuse contract in our committee this evening. I think this is one thing that, according to Alderman Morley, taking notes and highlighting to discuss further later is what I would like to do. I don't know if there's an absolute need at this time to hire the network interface coordinator and the project manager position, which is being proposed here tonight in this budget. So if we could discuss that towards the end, I would appreciate that. But I want to throw out also, maybe it would be wise to do a contractor compared to hiring a full-time employee for one, if not both of those positions, since some of them seem to be more like short-term projects compared to longer in duration.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my comments go along somewhat with Alderman Bram's comments. I, too, would like to discuss them at the end because I'd like to give staff a little more time. When we're looking at a budget with these kind of numbers, you know, a lot of it is the two people, a lot of it is capital outlay, and you know, I think most, if not all of us on the dais are professionals. We understand the importance of IT and keeping your systems and your software current. So I'm certainly not opposed to that, but what I'd like to see is what do we get for that? You know, we talk about efficiency, and if the argument around the IT expenditures are efficiencies, whether it's with staff time, with services that can be provided through the internet that we don't have now, how does that equate to efficiency? And I don't necessarily mean staff cuts, but does that retask then somebody else? That makes looking at these numbers a little bit easier if I know there's a quote of the quid. And I think that's important, whether it's IT, whether it's you know, the RF water meters, you know, those kind of efficiencies are you know, we're doing those things. The parking meters at the garages, we're doing those kind of things. It's always easier when we know what the offsetting efficiency is up front. So I guess that would be, you know, one of the notes I'd like to see expanded upon once we get to the end. Thank you.
Very good. Alderman Mulliner, Alderman Pezza.
Yeah, one of the pieces as it relates to this, just as a side note so everybody's aware of it, is that the IT study was done, and that needs to probably be brought back to the council so everybody can see it, and that will help to understand why some of these things are in here. And, you know, as we circle back, bringing that back at the same time would be a good thing to do.
Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. I think I agree with Alderman Bram and Healy, but I don't feel I know enough, and perhaps that report will let us know what it is we would be gaining if we did get these extra positions, because I haven't seen that, and I was just going to ask if that's something we could see. So,
Alderman Levin.
I remember the Finance Task Force spent a lot of time, and the only area that was clearly unanimously resolved in a recommendation to increase was the IT budget, and I think that it might be worthwhile taking a look at the task force report again on this particular area. But you know, in a time when we were looking at cuts, that was the one place where they said we would have some efficiencies by filling this position. Mm-hmm. So I know we're circling back, but I throw that out.
Very good. Excellent. Next. Oh.
Hey, real quick on that IT study. We're in the final draft of it right now. We don't have the completed study right now, but we're very close to getting it done. We talk about the IT positions. That's one thing that study. Actually, we've had a project manager in there. They're recommending go to an operations manager. What's happening right now is our staffing so low. We're just keeping things running. There's the strategic level is we're missing out on the strategic level right now because our strategic guy is keeping things running, and that's one of the big things the study will come out on. That's one of the main points. And the other thing is the data. We have a lot of data, and sharing that data and having availability of that data for who needs that data. And that takes people to do that. It takes a network administrator to keep that running. So that study should be back soon. We sent the final draft back to the NIU. They should have it to us very shortly. We'll get that out to everybody as soon as we get it. And there's basically 4 key points we're talking about in the executive summary. And I'll be glad to share that with everybody when we get that.
Very good.
Good questions. Pressing on would be planning, zoning, and economic development. The pages of 119, 121, and this is the other staff push, if you will, would be a assistant to our zoning administrator, which is probably the thinnest area of staffing, currently in our city operations plan, with the Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Department being disassembled and then reassembled with significant help by contractors, consultants. The internal staffing is limited to Than Werner as a zoning administrator. And on the planning zoning side, certainly the updates of the planning efforts and then the managing of the zoning operations cannot sustain, in our opinion, in a strong fashion for a size of community of Elmhurst with a single individual when that person is on vacation or sick, otherwise not able to be at work. There's not a backup. So this budget will provide for that restaffing. Also provided in the budgeted contract assistance for economic development plans for 5 possible areas of industrial, commercial, business development that could be implemented where the city as the planning agency would be in a control position and then be able to be a partner, if you will, through a tax increment financing district or a business development district to affect changes, be a partner with changes that would allow for economic development to be completed on a more expedited basis for the community. First needs to be a evaluation study. This budget provides for that study work to be done.
Very good. Okay, Alderman Pezza?
Thank you. I'm not seeing that bump up for the full-time assistant to Mr. Warner reflected down below under consultant fees. The reason we hired recently a new consultant was because we did not have that spot filled. So I would like to see it reflected that if we're going to have that full-time spot, we no longer need that consultant position, which would almost balance it out other than the benefits that go along with it. But we've been told the reason we needed that consultant was because we didn't have that spot. So now if we do get that spot, I think the consultant should go back to reflect that we hired that spot back.
I mean, I need some clarification. We've got some consultants doing work that isn't being done by anybody else, and we don't have anybody doing planning and zoning assistance but Than Werner, and we need to, in our opinion, have a depth in that area, which would be very difficult to be done by a consultant. That needs to be done by a staff person. I mean, I'm not exactly sure which consultant Alderman Pez is referring to.
Well, I'm kind of assuming this is similar to the job. Is this going to be similar to what Mr. Said used to do in this position?
Well, Mr. Said was a department head that had oversight and did a lot of actual evaluation and completed work efforts in all areas of planning and zoning and economic development. That position's not filled. There's other planning support positions that are also not filled. We've got 2 consultants doing parts of that, but nobody doing zoning support work. So at least the concept that staff has, there's some overlap, but there's no redundancies other than the staff person would be a second in a depth position should the zoning administrator not be able to be at work for a week or 2 weeks or for a vacation period of time. There'd be a support person there.
Can we circle that then and maybe get a job description on what that
That'd
would
be a good point.
be?
To elaborate on that.
Which line item was it again, Alderman Pezza?
41430-12.
41430-12, got it.
Reflecting 41410-01. Kind of both together.
I think the position would be the zoning administrator.
Right. So
planning assistant.
Got it. Okay. Very good. We'll come back. Alderman Levin?
Just for some explanation on the numbers, is the assistant getting phased in between 11-12 and 12-13?
This is one that was specifically budgeted at a 6-month for this 11-12 fiscal year, only budgeted for 6 months.
All right, and then under line 52, under contractual services, there's a jump up in the 11-12, goes from 40 to 100, in 11-12, and then back to 25. Is that a study that's
Those
being
are the
done?
planning studies of potentially five areas.
Thank you.
Alderman Brown?
I'm just trying to page through the budget here, but I'll just ask the question. Is this line item 414-10-01, the full-time employees, is this where the code enforcement employees also apply, or is that in another area of the budget?
That's in community development.
Community development? Okay.
Next.
Alderman Pez, I think
I'm
you had a
sorry,
question.
Alderman Pez, I didn't see you.
Thank you. Just a quick, under 3052, professional services, where I saw the explanation, but what portion of that 100,000 is actually the shop by Elmhurst piece?
I think it's 25,000.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Fire department and building department, which is overseen by the fire chief, pages 122 to 126 first, and then we'll get into the other areas. Again, if you wanted to take a quick look at page 38 of the budget document, it provides for that organization chart of the fire department, providing you greater detail of even the black shift, the red shift, and the gold shift, and how that rolls out with support to the deputy chief and to the chief. Some of the public ed objectives can be revisited. A lot of that had to be discontinued. You've got an overview of accomplishments, and then expectations going forward. The areas of the budget pages, though, are 122 through 126. We'll let the fire chief answer any hardball questions. I'll take a softball question, but hardball questions go straight to the chief.
Questions, Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question on the communication equipment, $329,000. Are we committed to buying that regardless? Do we have to buy that? Or I see that it was noted that we're going to apply for grants. If we don't get the grants, we're still buying it?
Yes, there's a bunch being covered by grants already, and there's a bunch being covered by the ETSB, the Emergency Telephone Service Board. This is a really small portion of the money being spent on this project. This is a DuPage County-wide project. This is the fire department to buy radios above what the grant was allowing. But we're also being a member of DUCOM, we're getting literally millions of dollars worth of infrastructure, dispatch councils, all being paid for through these grants also, which for our share of DUCOM is not going to go up that greatly.
So this 329 is just a small portion of the overall project cost?
That's correct.
And most of the other project cost is being paid for by grants, DUCOM?
That is correct.
All the other acronyms you're throwing
That's
around?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
And we're not even sure we're going to need all of that money, but that will cover everything that we may need.
So there's still a potential to get that 329 reduced?
That's
through
correct.
Other grants?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Alderman Pezza?
Thank you. Quick question about 80-06 vehicles. Can you just briefly go over what the vehicles are that need to be replaced and why we feel they need to be replaced?
Those are two command vehicles, station vehicles that are used for, one's our command vehicle, replacement of command vehicle. It's at Station 1 that the battalion chief rides in. And it was the old one. It's now a station vehicle. It's moving out, and it's just moving its way down. It's That one's got about 76,000 miles on it. It's a 1999. It's been pushed back already 2 years. And the other one's a 2000 Crown Victoria. That's got 84,000 miles on it. And it's the same thing. That was pushed. Oh, that one was been pushed back for 2 years. The 1999 Expedition was pushed back 1 year.
And what are these vehicles used for?
One's a station vehicle. One would be a command vehicle, the battalion chief's vehicle. He's in charge of the day-to-day operations of the fire department. And what do is the one that's now, it's 2 or 3 years old now. The one that's being used now, they'll be put back as a station vehicle and a reserve command vehicle. So if the main one is out being repaired or it's down for whatever reason, the one that's being used now would move into the frontline position.
Alderman Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take this opportunity on page 127, line item 40-41, radios and radio parts. I understand that by the additional description that this is for the, what do they call it, the wireless radio fire alarm system that we started here, I think, a year, maybe even 2 ago now.
Yes.
Could you kind of give us an update on where we are with that? Has it been generating additional revenue for the city, et cetera?
Yeah, and I believe as far as revenue, I think the projections for next year are almost $500,000, I think $490,000, something around that area now. Right now, we have 417 radios on our network. All the radios are owned by the city of Elmhurst. It was money that was borrowed from the Capital Improvement Fund, which we're paying back with interest, and it's $120,000 a year plus interest. And I believe this year we generated over $300,000. It's been a transition. We're slowly getting everybody onto the network. Right now there's 417. We still have about 50 out there right now that have to come over to the network. Some of our issues where their alarm panel's so old, the radio can't be tied into it. Some are just people that are difficult to get to sign the contract and get the radio installed. But we're working on that. Mr. Serino's office is helping us get compliance where we need it. But so far it's been very successful. And it definitely has decreased our trouble alarms in the area of the phone lines that were a problem before. It's definitely been improved. It's definitely improved.
I was just going to ask the question. The effectiveness, I think it was a two-part. Not only was it going to be effective for us to control the false alarms, but also it was going to be an opportunity, a new opportunity for the city of Elmhurst to create new revenue, as opposed to giving that money up to, a third party. And it looks like you're doing a fantastic job to be able to manage that.
It's
So
really worked.
it seems like we're on budget
It's worked
from
well.
2 years ago. So
I mean, part of us offset our costs. I mean, part of our dispatching is due to, we pay a fee to DUCOM every year, and part of that dispatching fee is because of automatic alarms, which are generated by the businesses out there, and this is some way to offset some of that cost.
What was that income side on this again? How much was that?
Approximately 500.
500,000? Okay. It's always good to know. When you're looking at the expense side, you got an income side that's almost 9 times that. It's a nice allocation. So, anybody else? Okay, next.
As is the next 2 pages, and after that is the building department, which Chief Kopp oversees. The building department's on page 32, 33, and 34. Building permits are coming in higher than last year, so they slumped and slumped and slumped, but as sales taxes beginning to return, building permits are coming back on new buildings and significantly higher on interior remodel permits.
Very good. See, Building Commissioner Dubiel back there, good job with keeping those building permits coming in. We appreciate that. Anybody? Discussion, question? Alderman Pezza.
Thank you again. Under 30-12 consultant fees, what consultant?
Page.
Oh, I'm sorry, page 131.
That's our
Who
plumbing.
is that?
That's our plumbing inspector and our elevator inspector.
Oh, okay. Never knew that, thank you.
So that's something we do on contractual basis versus employee?
That's correct.
Very good.
Per inspection is the way it's done.
Electrical, very good. Anybody else? Next.
I think we'll ask Mr. Hughes and his support group to get up here to be in a position to catch a rebound here if the others up here miss a rebound. We got more help catching rebounds. Public Works begins with Street and Bridge Administration, pages 137 through 139. And again, the Public Works organization is shown in greater detail beginning on page 54 and going beyond that with write-ups of, again, expectations, some of them self-imposed, some of them expressed by the City Council directly, along with accomplishments of the previous fiscal year. 137 through 139. I think with Public Works, it's in a general fashion, flat on operations, but beginning to come back on construction activity. Actually, last year was very heavy because of grants. We got another very heavy year with grants. I know the Public Works Committee was reviewing it in some detail at the committee level, but we got a grant for West Avenue, a grant for a portion of St. Charles Road, a grant for a portion of Spring Road and of Villette Street, along with then the general street resurfacing program, asphalt streets, and concrete patching. Maybe any highlights, Mr. Hughes?
Thank you. I was just going to add that the 4 projects that Tom just mentioned have a total construction cost of $3.3 million, and the city team was successful in getting $2.3 million in federal grants. So, really happy with that leveraging. Those are not in this year, but we're seeking grants to help with some of the work, like at York and Commonwealth. Those are also approved for funding, but not ready to go yet this year.
Very good. It's a nice ratio, gentlemen. Chairman Wagner, and then I'll go to Alderman Brame.
Mr. Hughes, let's see, line item, where'd it go on me? 3026. Under contractual services. I just can't remember exactly who those people are.
Sure. That money goes for, we have a consultant that we use when we have any plan reviews that occur in special flood hazard areas, because those take special county review. They work with us. They help us work with the county to make sure we stay in line with all of the rules and regulations. It also includes traffic studies. Anytime we use a traffic study consultant comes out of there. And then it's raised this year just in anticipation of additional stormwater studies or reviews that may have to occur that might be outside the scope of the comprehensive plan. So that's why it's up just for this year.
Very good.
Thanks.
Alderman Brame?
Alderman Wagner actually asked the question that I wanted to, so I have no further questions.
See that? Very good. Next, guys? Ladies?
Go through these items. Street nailing maintenance, getting into the specifics of the infrastructure maintenance and construction, pages 140 through 144.
A couple of highlights on that page, if I may, is that the rear yard drain program is being funded back up to its normal levels, and the 50/50 sidewalk program is being reinstated this year.
Very good. And this budget includes $5 million in street paving, the normal that we try to do as a goal.
5 miles, 1.5.
Excuse me,
yeah.
5 miles.
Right. That is in there, 1.5
My
miles.
miles and my
or
millions
1.5
mixed up
million.
there. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is something that we've talked kind of around in past years, especially as it pertains to the rear yard drain program. I just want to put the bug out there that connecting into the storm sewers might not necessarily be the best solution for many of these rear yards. And as we move forward with the flooding and storm sewer analysis, I hope that even though we've added this program back into the budget, that we should be open-minded about other opportunities for managing rear yard storm water management problems. And that there are opportunities for us as a city to help fund things that might be cheaper than connecting with the storm sewer.
That's an excellent point, and the city council has wisely put in the comprehensive plan to get some analysis of that, so we will definitely get some good help with that going forward.
How many people are there in the queue, as it were, that want to get?
In the rear, right now, there's actually only 6 in the queue right now. It's a, you know, they just come in dribs and drabs, and it's all directly related to how much rain we get, so.
In the 50/50 sidewalk program, how many people are sort of waiting for that to come back?
Well, we haven't gone telling anybody yet, so it's, because it's, you know, we gotta wait till the budget's approved, but we've always been able to spend that money, so. We have had a lot of people who have asked over the last couple of years, and then when we said it's 100%, they just passed, so we still have that backlog that we'll go back to and revisit.
Thank you.
Very good. Alderman Pezza?
Question on page 140, line 10-01. Is that jump in salary, is that another position, or I didn't see an explanation of that jump, unless I missed it.
Tom, is that just refilling the empty position? Okay.
It was really just a reallocation of salaries between the general fund and the motor fuel tax fund. So you'll see additional salaries charged here, but a reduction in the motor fuel tax fund.
Okay.
Just to help us out with our reporting to the state.
I just want to add something. I'm not sure how or why it started, but I had noticed the excellent job that the Public Works Committee and staff has done this whole year in contracts and how much underbid everything has been coming in, and I really appreciate that. But I guess my question is, how and where is that accounted for? Because you've done a great job bids and coming under bid and saving the money. So how is that reallocated or accounted for, or how does that work?
Well, that, and then probably City Manager Borchert or Marilyn Gaston could answer better, but that is where that fence of spending, when we come up short of it, it really goes back into the pool, which eventually becomes that additional money that's able to be put into the fund balance in any of the funds. So it's sort of cumulative. It doesn't get reallocated per se, okay. And it's just over the whole width of the budget, if you will.
Well, thank you for that. I've noticed quite a difference.
Absolutely. And I would assume if we're borrowing, if we're floating a bond like on a parking deck, which we were, I think, almost $1.5 million under budget on, probably won't have to borrow as much either, which I think is, in the end, is the goal.
Correct.
Now put as much in the fund balance as we can and not have to borrow. So, Alderman Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Pezza asked the question about the salaries, which is good. I just want to throw out a general comment here, and that's I'm happy to see that there's restoring of expenditures of some of these critical areas, being storm sewer cleaning, last year 10,000 up to 50,000. I think this is critical in regards to maintaining our infrastructure here in Elmhurst, sidewalk, curb, gutter repair, et cetera, down the line. So it's good to see that we are, hitting those core services pretty hard in this proposed budget for Public Works.
Very good. Alderman Wagner, Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Mr. Hughes, where's the Christopher Burke money? I just can't seem to find it. It might not be in Public Works.
You know where it is, Tom?
We haven't paid him yet. We're keeping it until he earns it.
I don't mind that.
Where's it at in the budget?
Right.
Sewer and water.
I think it's in
Probably under capital. Sewer water.
Throw a bug into the next.
Page 290 in the Stormwater Fund.
219?
290.
290 for
290.
stormwater, and in the utility fund for the sanitary. But we have accounted for the Burke RJN and All of that payment, by the way, will go to Burke. The RJN work, RJN is a co-consultant with Burke, but Burke is the overseeing contractor. So as you see work being completed, once it's completed, it needs to be reviewed for payment. The payments will be processed all to Burke, and Burke will be paying RJN, and we'll make sure that Burke pays RJN as they should before we make another Burke payment. But they're on the case, they're on the job, and I would think next month we'll begin seeing billing requests for their services.
Absolutely. Well, that's a big contract for us. I want to make sure it's in there, so it's a question we'll ask Alderman Pezza.
So this may have nothing to do with anything, but Burke will be billing RJN, but I'm sure the city will see RJN's work and billing and all of that, even though we're not directly paying them. Okay.
Open and transparent.
Found it. Thank you.
Very good.
And
Next.
I want to just say a word of appreciation to Mr. Hughes and his really crack engineering staff that has got a process in place where they seek opportunities within the Elmhurst system of maintenance needs that would apply in a high-level qualifying category for grants. And as a result of that, Elmhurst has received significant federal transportation grants last year and again this year, and probably the year following relative to intersection improvements at the south end of town. To the point where such success has been received in Elmhurst that the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference changed the rules going forward to limit the number of grants any one community can get in 1 year. So that's about as positive of an affirmation that you can get when they change the rules to hold you back as a community. So I applaud to Mr. Hughes and Corey Keating for her work and leadership.
Very good. Next.
Snow removal, ice control, again, that was offensive spending that was authorized. Mr. Hughes to go over the fence, to shed extra snow plowing and snow hauling when necessary. This particular year, it appears as if, I haven't seen it officially approved yet, but we're anticipating that the federal disaster may provide some financing back to Elmhurst for the more severe blizzard snow operations. There's a 48-hour period that appears to be meeting eligibility criteria. We may get some monies back. I don't think we've projected that in our fund balances going forward. So if that grant is received from the disaster, that'll be good news. That's not yet been identified in dollars, but we're beginning to think it should happen.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've actually got a question that's going to go kind of counter to some of the questions I've asked so far tonight. It seems to me we're well under budgeted next year. I mean, you look at just overtime, we're projecting 159.9. We've not spent anywhere near that. We've blown that number every year, and if you look at the total, we've blown that every year. So what's the rationale for, I would suggest, under budgeting like we have?
The reason for that is on page 210 in the MFT, there's a capital grant that the city is receiving through the MFT system, I'll say. And you can spend it just for certain items. Snow removal costs are some of those costs. So this is an allocation of costs from the general fund to the MFT account. So on page 210, you can see this is where we're charging salt, and this is where some of the payroll is.
Okay.
So
and I heard you say it's a grant we're getting from somebody?
Yes, and it's should be 5 years, $188,000 each year. So we'll be charging costs from the snow control area to the MFT account.
But not all of that money's coming from a grant. Some of it's coming from the MFT.
In this case, I would say the 188,000 a year will be used for snow removal.
But there's 543, so it's some of it's coming out of our
Some of it's
MFT,
coming
some of it's
and-
coming from a grant, and then the rest is coming out of the general fund.
Yes, and it's particularly large in the 2011-12 year because we received 188,000 in the year we're in, so we're using that next year.
So then the total budget would be somewhere in the area of 900,000.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alderman. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As long as we're talking about salt, I drive on roads that the county maintains as I go to work every day, and they're using that new application of
Beet juice.
And is this in our planning? Have we started to look at that? I imagine it requires a total shift of equipment as well as material.
Well, we have looked at it for several years, and actually Jim Hirakawa, who's our street superintendent, is not only a civil engineer, he also has an undergraduate degree in chemistry, so he'll give you an hour lesson on the shortfalls of beet juice.
You missed Dennis Stryker, now we've got Jimmy Hirakawa.
Basically, it's the chloride. So we put down sodium chloride, which is the salt. That's good to about 20 degrees. And then we add calcium chloride, which takes it down to an even lower temperature, 0 or less. Calcium chloride has 32% chloride in it. Beet juice has 19% roughly chloride. It's a natural product, so it's never perfectly the same, whereas when we buy our chemicals from Dow, it's exactly 32%. So our studies have been, it's not as cost effective as using the calcium chloride. We would have to change out equipment. First of all, we would have to add a second tank for beet juice. And really, what we found that the application where it really does make sense is on county roads, or if you have a road district that's fairly far flung and you have curves and higher speeds, it may have a purpose because you can't get there, so you can pre-apply it. But in our case, that's not a problem for us. So both cost and effectiveness, it doesn't come up winning. Every study that Jim has looked at, beet juice is always compared to just rock salt, and the rock salt alone without the calcium chloride is nowhere near as effective. So we think we have a pretty good system. We've gone from 8 or 9 years ago, you used to pull up with the V-box or the dump truck, and we had a spray bar that would just spray the top of the salt with the calcium chloride, so the mixture wasn't all that great. It wasn't homogeneous. Now, if you'll see those little white tanks on the slipped in by the V-box, that's an onboard wetting system, and that's actually spraying the calcium chloride right onto the salt as it's coming off the spinner. It's the most effective way to mix the two. It eliminates the roll of the salt. It helps hold it in place, and so it adds to our brine after the event. So we feel we've got a pretty good system that works really well, really cost effective, and particularly for a more urban setting like we have.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
There are some environmental benefits to beet juice as opposed to calcium chloride. Our streets drain, for the most part, into Salt Creek.
Yeah.
Is that part of the conversation?
Well, it's still the main component is the sodium chloride, the rock salt. So whether you're putting beet juice on it or the calcium chloride, you've got that 32% down to 19%. So yes, it is lesser, but you still have a lot of rock salt being dropped. And we really try to get away with the minimum we can, both to conserve the salt for costs and in future storms, and obviously, to put down as little as we can. So.
Mr. Chairman, Hipskin?
Thank you for the education.
Courtesy Jimmy Hirakawa.
Very good.
Forestry is next, 147 and 149, and again, news is improving in the forestry area as well.
We had a very light, not very light, we had a light DED last year, down about 30%, so no one knows why it goes up and down, but we had a good year last year in lesser losses.
And the tree replacement program is back funded, and we're now financing the advance work of removing some of the less quality ash trees, anticipating at some point that emerald ash tree borer will find its way to Elmhurst, and there'll be quicker losses citywide, and if they can be removed a little at a time and replaced a little at a time, we'll be better off as a community, and the appearance and aesthetics of our suburban residential parkways will be better, and we're into that season now.
One of
that cycle now.
You know, the city council approved last year that the program to remove about 5% of our ash trees every year. We'll end up taking down about 85 this year. We were gunning for 100, but some people, the ones we picked, they wanted to leave them up, so we leave them up. But as Tom said, by starting early, it allows you to spread out that what would be probably every tree will die in 3 to 5 years once it gets here in earnest. And then you not only have the economic impacts, but you have a definite canopy impact. I mean, if we start now and over 10, 15 years, if we're lucky and it doesn't get here real fast, some of the trees that we'll be planting this year that were taken down last year will be 5, 10, 15 years older. So you don't have that huge negative impact on your canopy, which also, you know, has a negative, losing all that canopy has a negative impact on stormwater. So you want to have the trees around. So it's a really excellent program that the city council has put together.
Good, very good. Alderman Braham, I'll go to Alderman Pezza.
Yeah, just again, the Dutch elm disease and where we're at. We've discontinued the injection program a few years back, a couple years back now. Have we seen any effect, pro or con, on that? And it seems like our numbers are a little bit up, but I think that's the removal of the ash tree. So
right, did both in that item. You know, we studied it for quite a long time, and we could find no difference in the mortality rate between the trees that were injected and trees that weren't. And we only, well, on the city trees that were injected, we were only injecting the most healthy, the choicest candidates, and we still weren't really seeing a significant difference in the mortality rates.
Very good. Alderman Pezza.
Regarding the ash trees, I thought I read that Elmhurst was one of the communities that will be receiving funding to help with that.
Right, we just received a $20,000 grant to help with.
It was $20,000, and
right,
is that reflected in this somehow?
I believe it is not in there, but it is coming this year. We just found out like last week, so.
Very good. Anybody else? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Oh, thank you. You may have said this and I just didn't hear it. Are we removing ashes on private property, or is this just the public
Just
ash?
Parkway.
Okay, very good. Next.
Electrical, pages 150 through 152. Any highlights, Mr. Hughes?
No, pretty much standard operating procedure. We did one highlight from this year was we're successful in getting funding for an installation of UPS, uninterrupted power supply, at several of the intersections on Route 83, so that if we have another one of those long duration power outages, we no longer have to have police officers out there for many hours at great risk to themselves, great risk to the motoring public, and of course a lot of cost. So that was done in conjunction with IDOT.
Very good. Anybody questions? Okay.
Rubbish disposal is on 153, 154. This is really a pass-through in the fourth year, I believe, of a five-year contract with Allied Waste.
Entering the fourth year.
Entering the fourth year. And Public Works Committee is working on its recommendation for a subsequent council meeting relative to the manner in which they believe it would be best to pass on the costs which the city have with the waste hauler to the city's customers.
Okay. So strictly a pass-through of cost.
Correct.
Very good.
It's not a revenue maker for the city, simply trying to cover costs.
Very good. Questions? You okay? Alderman Wager?
Just real quick, why is there so much in the health and welfare portion of this budget item at the bottom? For rubbish. Page, Patty? It's 153,
Second to the bottom.
as opposed to the contract up top.
What line, Mr. Alderman Wagner?
It's Well, it's at the bottom, it's the last line item. It doesn't have a number next to it. It says-
Under rubbish disposal, it says health and welfare.
The total.
It's the total, I think.
Yeah, just a refresher of my mind here.
It is a total line item. It's just a category, how we group the expenditures based on our audit and reporting guidelines. So that's really just a summary total.
Pretty standard in municipalities and stuff. That's how they do it? Okay. Thanks, Tom.
All right, and we are hitting the 10 o'clock mark. Everybody doing okay?
Yeah.
Do you think we can finish up tonight, this next page, or how are we doing? Are we going to be here? So if everybody's up for it, we'll keep on going and rally through this, so that's great. Alderman Pezza.
Just a quick follow-up on the rubbish collection. I thought the discussion going forward with the raise, there was a fee increase other than what's being passed through. I thought there was a portion for administration or something. I was in the little bit of the discussion. Would that reflect somewhere else?
Well, there is, we pass on through the monthly fee and the stickers to pay the city's expenses for the contract waste hauler, and a fair allocation of what the city administratively spends in managing its responsibilities associated with that contract. So it's all expenses in is what the fees are generated to cover, but doesn't make profit, if you will, for the city. Covers expenses, covers the contract, outgoing expense, and some of the administrative. It covers, I think, all of the administrative expenses that we've got in managing the contract.
And it covers the expenses that are not reflected in monthly fees or stickers, such as the spring cleanup and the leaf pickup. So those bills come in separately, so we have to cover those costs as well.
So that administration part that's also added in there, where is that in here? Or is that not in this?
One example is that we allocate street sweeping. And street sweeping is allocated in 6041. So some of those expenditures in the street sweeping line item, actually we recoup through our fees. They're not recorded in 6045 in the rubbish division. They're in the street admin. So that's one example of an expense that we try to recover. It's not recorded here. It's in another division budget.
Alderman Gutenkopf?
I think what you're asking is where's the overhead, and I think it's just built into the budget lines that you see in front of you. That overhead for covering these other things that don't come directly out of the fees residents pay for garbage pickup, right?
Right, the garbage, these are the expenses in here, but there are other expenses that have to be covered that the city doesn't get revenue off of the stickers or monthly for those.
But that's overhead and it's just built into this.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Public Works Committee is looking at it right now, and I don't know when we'll issue the report. It'll be very soon, but when we do, the expenses that are allocated to the overhead, to the various functions that the administration fees cover will be spelled out in the report. So whether it's leaf pickup, IT services, supplies, it'll all be spelled out in the report. So it'll be a little more clear that we can then track back to the budget and say, you know, the 18,000 for this is right there, though it might not show up on the
line item, yeah,
rubbish disposal page. But that'll be coming out once the report is issued soon, I hope.
Very good. We know your committee's very thorough, so we nothing but the best of expectations. So, next.
Municipal buildings provided its services under the oversight of the Public Works Department. The municipal buildings are on 155 through 157. Just getting back at some of the deferred maintenance over the last couple of years in maintaining the building infrastructure of the community.
Good.
Graham has a question.
Alderman Bram? Sorry?
Yes, on page 156, under capital outlay, 8023 building improvements, it's going from 12,000 to 391,000. I was trying to get clarity from the explanation page on page 157. Could you dive into a little bit more detail on the cost breakdown of that line item?
Yeah, I apologize. There was a mistypo on the J form. Those two items, the 391 is 216,000 for the new city hall roof, and then also 175 of that is for that lift station landscaping project that the city is trying to get constructed. And so that's what the overhead doors were not in there. The lift station is what that should have said. I apologize for that typo. So those are the two projects that go into that item.
City roof and lift station.
Yes.
The lift station improvements, that comes from another fund, correct?
It's stormwater lift stations, and my understanding is we've applied for a grant.
Right.
We're waiting to see how that grant is received before we proceed with the Public Works Committee in advancing the reconsideration of the project plans and the bidding process to see how we do in that grant request. But should it be a grant that we receive and then proceed with, this is the area where it would be paid from if we elect to proceed, if you elect to proceed.
And this doesn't come from the stormwater fee in lieu of?
No.
at all?
Very good. Alderman Pesley, you had a hand up?
It could
say
have,
what they
but
said.
it's not
Yeah.
targeted
Okay.
for
Good
that.
questions. Chairman Kennedy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like, if we can just put a circle around the replacement, circle back to that when we talk about capital. Just, there's some talk here in the city. Do we ultimately try and combine buildings and services between Park District, School Board? Let's just be mindful of anything to that in terms of if we're going to spend money on a roof and how that all applies.
Very good.
Okay.
Excellent. Next.
Central maintenance equipment, this is the garage operation of Public Works Department, 158, 160. It's exciting if you're there, but routine.
Chairman Wader?
Yep. Mr. Hughes, how do you calculate the diesel fuel cost? Is that do we have a contract in
I'm
place
sorry.
with World Fuel?
I'm sorry.
The diesel fuel costs, I mean, they're obviously gas is rising.
It's a guess. I mean,
It's a guess?
we try to watch it, but it's a guess.
Guesstimate.
Yeah, I will say that one thing we're happy about is that by 2012 we believe we'll be able to be receiving E85 at the Public Works garage, as every vehicle will be able to run on E85. So we'll no longer be getting the regular stuff. Will be getting the E85. So by 2012.
Going the Fusion, Prius hybrids still. Okay. Very good. Alderman Healy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question just popped up. I know that I know the Park District gets gas from us, and I believe the school board does too. Do we increase the costs proportionally that is that passed along to them as well? I assume it is.
Oh yes, it's at the going rate, whatever that month was, right?
It's a monthly calculation?
I believe roughly, yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Next.
Public benefits, 161, 162. Basically, the hospital project. The hospital's paying for their fair share, and there is sidewalk. It's all hospital.
Is that all hospital? Did you say both line items? Or all
Line
three?
25 is street improvements for the hospital project, and that's really all that's in 1112.
Alderman Pezza.
I just want to double clarify. The money for the street improvements for the hospital so we are saying this is not a part of that 2.8 million cap? This is something different, is that correct?
And this is where the city will be paying its fair share. The hospital is fronting those expenditures and then bills the city its fair share. Our fair share is per the agreement with the hospital and has a maximum not to exceed of $2.8 million.
So this is a part of that agreement?
$800,000 is
Okay.
Very good. Good question. Alderman Brown.
I'm just wondering on line item 8034, sidewalk improvements, it's zeroed out here. What was this line item in previous years that it was funded before and no longer being funded?
Those were the new sidewalks.
This is the new sidewalk?
The city's share to a special service area sidewalk project if there was one. So this would be the 1011 estimated. That would have been Gladys Avenue.
Yeah.
This is one that I would like circled to be revisited as well.
What item was that again, Alderman?
I'm sorry?
Sidewalk improvements.
Sidewalk 8034 on page 161.
8034, got it. Okay, next.
Claims 168, 169. Elmhurst is self-insured for lower claims, and it's an estimate based on past practice and an understanding of what one can anticipate going forward. There is insurance for more catastrophic claims. These are where those items are paid for under what the city has self-insured itself for. We analyze annually the better way to go, insurance for everything or self-insuring, and the size of the owner's fleet suggests that after the fact evaluation shows that self-insuring is still a preferred way to manage this area of city responsibility. If we don't have a claim, we don't pay the claim.
Questions? Everybody okay? 111?
In terms of our self-insured status, do we carry any kind of umbrella over a certain limit?
Your reinsurance or?
Yes, on property, we're self-insured up to 100,000, and then we have insurance above that. For liability, we're self-insured up to 250,000, and then we have insurance up to 10 million.
Okay.
Above that.
Thank you.
Just for the record, Alderman Pezza has espresso beans in case anybody gets a little vibrant here. So. We appreciate you thinking of us, though. City Manager Borchert, next.
Some of the health and welfare services are next. Senior services, 170 and 171, and health services, 172. Trying to keep the area of city support in line with what has been traditionally provided. Watching closely that senior taxi subsidy and disabled taxi subsidy. Trying to find a way to get to the DuPage program, but not quite able to do so, and Maryland has an update.
Some of you may recall that we looked at Ride DuPage probably 2 to 3 years ago. And it was just too expensive at the time. It would pretty much double our costs. So you look at the line item right now, and you're going to say, well, our costs have doubled. Did you do this without us knowing about it? And no, we didn't. But it's a phenomenon that happened when the state passed the free Metro rides. Our ridership and our taxis have increased We had 342 new people come in and get their taxi card, so that was one thing. Our rides in March of 2009 were 270 for that month. January of 2011, 580 rides. So our users, people are either using it more, and we're still delving into this because the numbers are really quite fantastic. So we have increased ridership and probably and increased rides. So people just became, I believe, more aware that the city had this program as other services became free, and they were at City Hall getting their other cards. The other thing that we'll do some research on and we will bring to the Finance Committee is the user pays $1.40 for their ride. Anything above $1.40, the city picks up. It's been $1.40 since probably 1985. So it's something that perhaps as we're looking at this line item, maybe we need a little bit more equity in what the user is paying and what the city is paying. So we'll come back with that recommendation. The projections right now do not reflect that. They reflect the program as it stands today, as our users are using the program. So it's a very popular program, you can see. But it's also turned out to be much more expensive than it has been in the past.
And it's a very good point. I think, the town hall meetings the aldermen are having, we're talking about these issues. We're letting the seniors know. And I was at Alderman Bram and Alderman Rose's town hall meeting last week, and we spoke about the taxi rides, and people were asking questions. So I think the more and more awareness, pocket pals getting mailed out, targeting the seniors and even their caregivers. So these are good programs. And in most towns right now, I got to tell you, they're cutting these programs. And I as a mayor, and I think we as a council, do not even, we want to only help our seniors maintain and enhance the quality of life they have. So there's not one cut here in seniors, which I think is important. So, Alderman Levin.
Is this, I know Metra is just age-based, or it was when they made free rides. Is the senior program also just age-based, or is any need component?
Just age-based.
Yeah. Thank you. And this also goes to Meals on Wheels and all the other, areas that we offer as well, too. So, thank you. Next.
172 is the city share for ambulance service and the annual contract for mosquito abatement services. The ambulance service managed by the fire chief, there is a billing component, and based on that contract, the city gets some expenses paid back depending on collections of the company, and because of the utilization and the number of calls, the expense to the city seems to be going down a little bit as the billings are more successfully being collected by our contract provider.
Next.
Contingent projected for 11-12 is just a $50,000 contingency. We felt that we've had enough disasters in the previous years and we should have a year off. So we're providing us a lighter contingency number. Actually, that's what was budgeted last year. We had to access it at a much higher amount. Many years, the contingency isn't touched.
I think after last year, all the odds in our favor. I think we've got hit with just about everything but an earthquake. I shouldn't say. Chairman Wagner.
Not subtle, pretty significant. Last year, the contingency was actually financed by the Capital Improvement Fund. If you recall,
right.
The general fund was under such of a difficult siege, really, with the economy, revenues down, expenditures not down, needing to maintain those services, needed to have a contingency. City Council authorized the use of Capital Improvement Fund dollars to help out that general fund. This year, this budget goes back, I think, in all cases to the more traditional, more appropriate capital is capital and general is general. We're back to where we want to be, back where you've asked us to get to be.
Chairman?
That said, let's just make sure we can stay inside the fence.
We'll seek permission to go over.
Hopefully God lets us do that too.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cable television, 174. Nothing significant there. Interfund transfers, 177. This is what you've had some discussion about, anticipating a need of the council, a desire of the council, and understanding the Finance Committee was working on a commitment to make a payment to the working cash fund. City staff working concurrently, kind of on the same path, had to prepare a budget document, prepared a budget document estimating that there'd be a payment to the working cash fund as shown. The transfer debt service on a GO bond issue is, again, a past practice of moving the funds, capital dollars, to where they need to go to make general obligation bond payments.
Very good. Next.
Capital Improvement Fund is, starts on page 178. Goes to 182. Gets into the infrastructure, maintenance, and these pages provide the direction of where the Capital Improvement Fund is providing assistance for capital projects that are in the budget.
Intergovernmental revenues, what's the 2.6 to 3.4? Is that, it's on page 179, under revenues, intergovernmental. Just curious what that
That'd be the revenue to the Capital Improvement Fund, which is state income tax, and in some cases, grants.
Okay, cool. Very good.
Somebody said there's no way you're going to get through what Marilyn Gaston identified as an objective, and I said, I believe in the city council.
Marilyn Gaston identified these?
This has never happened. One and a half
We didn't do, we missed the historic museum.
They're going to come back. This museum, I believe, and library are going to come
Okay.
next week. And police.
We're not done.
We're not done yet, but we got a lot done. I think we got a lot accomplished tonight. Alderman Bram.
Yeah, just a general question. There's been a lot of talks about internet sales tax. What is the general update on internet sales tax and how that may or may not affect us? Uh-oh.
I paid on my income tax.
And that's what City Manager Borchert mentioned and stuff, that recently the state approved the quote-unquote the Amazon tax.
Right.
And what that's going after are some of those places where people buy stuff online and don't pay sales tax. The state did add on the income tax form this year spaces for residents of Illinois to pay the use tax. Basically, just because you don't pay it when you purchase, you're still responsible for it, for local use tax. And that local use tax, if that does bump up, we are provided a share of that through per capita distributions and stuff. So if it happens, but you've read a lot of articles that Amazon is now dropping a lot of their partners that do have a presence in Illinois and stuff. So there's pros and cons that it may actually hurt us.
Thank you.
Very good. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Follow up to Alderman Bram's question, and you touched on it there at the very end. Are there any potential losses And the one that jumps to my mind is Lucky Motors. I want to say they do a lot of their business over the internet. Is that a potential issue for us?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Are there any businesses in Elmhurst, whether they're internet-based or do business over the internet, where that they might leave the state because of this?
No, we should be okay.
Thank you.
I think it's mainly catching those businesses that aren't charging sales tax. In Lucky Motors' case, they do charge sales tax for those transactions. So that's a good point, though, because they are bringing in some nice revenue. And that's because, I think, of the leadership that we've had up here over the last couple of years, tough decisions that we've made, task force doing a lot of due diligence. We embraced over, I believe it was 25 members of our community that gave us some good guidance that we're in a much better position today than we were 2 years ago. And so having said that, I appreciate the council. I appreciate the will of the council and the openness to make the tough decisions, and staff for their support and their guidance in the whole process as well, too. So again, we're determining the fence, and the fence will be approved probably first week of April, providing everything is going as smooth as it's gone tonight. And I encourage the people that had circle backs to talk to staff, discuss the issues, and then we'll bring that up before the final vote and the budget's passed here. So with that, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Alderman Healy, Alderman Morley with a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.